Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to BLSA Alumni Spring Weekend. I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am to see all of y'all here. I'm seeing some really familiar faces, which just warms my heart. I'm seeing some new faces, which I'm very excited about too. And I'm seeing all of our current students who are out here to support the BLSA. This is beautiful. I've only been here for 5 months in this position, but as many of y'all already know, I graduated from the law school in 2013, so to see this right now, to see how strong we are right now, I'm not gonna take up too much time talking because I know I like to talk, but I just wanna say it's such a pleasure to see all of you here. And so a few of y'all came to the cocktail hour that just happened. This is the Fireside that we're gonna do this evening, and then after this, we're gonna have a March Madness game watch. It's the Sweet 16 tonight, so we've got a bunch of good games. We're gonna have 3 different screens playing, so it'll be really, really exciting. We've got food for you. You know, we're taking care of you, so it's gonna be a good night. And I think this is gonna be a really interesting discussion. I'm pleased to introduce the 3 of our speakers here. We've got Mauri Miller to my right. Mauri and I graduated the same year, 2013. He's on the NDLA board. We have our BLSA president, Monica Bell. We're very excited about her. And to my left is Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson oversees BSC Global's diversity and inclusion strategies and initiatives. He's also a 2007 graduate from the law school. He helps to develop and execute the company's overall social justice vision. He spearheads BSC's Diversity Council, employee resource groups, and collaborates to provide a D&I lens with departments across the company. Jackie also developed BSC Global's Supplier Diversity Program, which creates opportunities for local, minority, and women-owned businesses to become suppliers of goods and services for the organization. Jackie joined BSC Global in 2020 with tremendous experience focused on the recruitment and growth of diverse talent, as well as establishing corporate and community programs related to diversity and inclusion. Jackie began his career as a litigator, and a few years later, his love of sports led him to become the general counsel of All Pro Sports and Entertainment, a sports agency based in New York City, where he served as a certified player agent. At All Pro, he was charged with spearheading the social responsibility efforts of professional athletes, helping them identify areas of need in their communities and establishing charitable foundations that addressed those issues, while also overseeing the implementation of community programming. After more than 5 years at All Pro, Jackie followed his entrepreneurial dreams and his passion for fitness into health and wellness spaces by becoming the founder and CEO of Nova Fitness Innovation. As a Black entrepreneur, Jackie not only focused on diversity and inclusion within his own company, but also participated in efforts to help other minority entrepreneurs break the barriers he and his professional athlete clients have faced. Jackie's a proud graduate of Duke University and even prouder graduate of Notre Dame Law School, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Public Policy with a minor degree in African American Studies. He holds his Juris from the law school here. Thank you so much to our participants. Please give them a big round of applause and let's enjoy this evening together.
So to kick this off, Jackie, we're going to dive really deep into the extremely kind of full bio that we just heard. One of the things, though, is, this is a fireside chat. And as you can see, Jackie and I were board meetings this morning. We've changed out of our jackets. We've come in more casual. And very frankly, we are rocking the new BLSA sweaters that we were able to buy today. So thank you to the BLSA leadership and executive board on making sure that we had these really nice sweaters. But this is a conversation. We are here to learn more about Jackie, learn about what Jackie's doing, kind of how he got to where he is. But we really invite you all to participate in this conversation, okay? So with that said, I will turn it over to your esteemed leader, Monica Bell, and Monica will kick us off for today.
Thank you, Mauri. We just got a really great bio about Jackie from Max. So Jackie, do you have anything else you'd like to tell us about you before we get started?
Max made me sound better than I am. I'm good to go.
Awesome. Well, let's start at the beginning of your Notre Dame journey then. How did you come to the understand that you were going to start law school?
So me wanting to be a lawyer is interesting because I didn't know any lawyers growing up. The lawyers that I knew were on TV. So I was in love with shows like Law and Order, but the thing that really drew me to law school was a HBO show called Arliss, and Arliss was a super agent on that show, and so I knew that I wanted to get into sports in some way, shape, or fashion, and so watching Arliss on that show, watching his command with professional athletes made me want to pursue a career in law and eventually go into sports. But I didn't know any lawyers at all, and so I was really modeling that off of what I saw on TV.
In that process, did you have anybody that really pushed you in that direction, or were you kind of just self-driven?
More self-driven. I mean, my parents always instilled in me to, if you have a dream, say it out loud and do whatever it takes to go get it. And so, I told them I wanted to go to law school. They were fully supportive of that. They simply asked how could they help. And so, they put me in programs and encouraged me to, do public speaking and do more reading and writing to get prepared. But they simply, just said that, like, we'll support you in whatever it is that you want to do. They didn't know any lawyers either.
So, Jackie, you self-driven, going to law, and went to Duke. And how did you come to decide that you wanted to come to Notre Dame?
I've been in love with Notre Dame since I was a young kid, and that's primarily due to Rocket Ishmael and Tim Brown. Watching them on TV, razzle and dazzle, they were the one team that you could watch throughout the nation. So I grew up in Atlanta, so you could watch the Georgia Bulldogs, which we did, but you could always watch Notre Dame on Saturdays. And so I grew up a fan. I knew I wanted to be here. And so when I was applying for law school, this was at the top of my list. But I never stepped foot on Notre Dame's campus until my first day of orientation. That's how much I loved the idea of going to Notre Dame, that I didn't need to be here to confirm that.
So what was you never stepped foot on campus until your orientation. We have admitted students here who are doing the exact opposite. Right? They're stepping on campus to get a feel for what it is. Was there anything that in your research, what drove you to say, you know what, I don't even need to see this place in person to decide I want to go here?
I would say the sense of community and how much the people that I knew who went to Notre Dame loved Notre Dame. Charlotte, who's sitting up here now, was my mentor at Notre Dame. When I got into Notre Dame, she called me and talked to me about coming to Notre Dame. Bobby Brown, who was the BLSA president at the time, called me, and I knew Bobby from Bobby being on the football team.
Yeah.
And Bobby called me and said, "Hey man, like, you want to be here? Trust me."
Yeah.
And I did, and the fact that people were calling, they didn't do that when I applied to Duke. Nobody called, so it was just, come here if you want to. But the fact that people were taking time out of their schedules to call me and then direct me to other people and introduce me to Duke alum who were at Notre Dame, it was just the sense of community that I was looking for.
That's awesome. What's funny is anybody in the room who knows Bobby knows that the way he just said Bobby called him is exactly how Bobby called him and talked to him when he first met him. So, you get to Notre Dame. Mauri?
How was it? I mean, obviously the climate changes. I'm very curious as to what it was like when you were here.
So, again, I had never stepped foot on Notre Dame's campus before I got here, so it was a different experience for me. But I will say that coming to Notre Dame was one of the best things that I've ever done. My closest friends, my network, all came out of Notre Dame. My wife, I met the first day of orientation at Notre Dame. And that sense of community that I described before, that I got from Charlotte and I got from Bobby Brown, that's something that has continued with me. My core group of Notre Dame friends I speak to every single day. The godmother of my kids, was in our class at Notre Dame. So like my family by choice were all classmates of mine from Notre Dame. So I couldn't be happier with having come here.
Now, this is a BLSA event that we're hosting right now. What was it like being here as a Black student?
Not as deep as it is now. And again, it was different. You know, I grew up, you know, in Atlanta, Georgia, to where, you know, my high school class, there were, you know, about 1,100 people, and maybe 10 of them did not look like me. So this was a totally different experience. But I would say that the smaller group of us allowed for tighter connections, allowed for connections with Professor Dwight King, and allowed for us to connect with Judge Chamblee. And you know, now I love to see how big BLSA has gotten. But for us, you know, BLSA and HALSA were essentially one organization because we were all together. So I went to all the HALSA meetings. Everybody else came to all the BLSA meetings. But again, that sense of community, that network, that bond, you know, still exists now. And I graduated, you know, 15 years ago. But that's my village.
How does it make you feel to utter those words? I heard you say it for the first time today when we were just at the reception. You know, I graduated 15 years ago. What does that mean? How does it make you feel?
I feel younger than I sound. But yeah, 15 years ago is a long time, and it's a long time of change. What I see in the law school now, when I come back and have conversations, I know where he is now with Max, or talk to Dean Cole, or have conversations with you. I love the direction that the university is going. I love the talent that the university is bringing in. And hopefully you guys know that you have a network that is like actively willing to help you in any way that we can. So I like where we're going. I like the fact that we're about to have a DEI conversation, following these board meetings. I mean, that's a space that I can't say it readily existed, when I first stepped on campus in 2004.
Jackie, you mentioned networks and networking. And one thing that I feel a lot of people undervalue here at Notre Dame sometimes is that network. What was your experience with it like while you were here at the law school, and how has it helped you after you left?
I got my first job out of law school during like a weekend like this. I met with a fellow board member, Tom Kirk, and got a chance to connect with him. And at that time, I did not know that I was going to be going, to the East Coast. I thought I was going back home to Atlanta. My wife had other ideas. And so, but I had the opportunity to meet Tom, develop that relationship. I then, was a summer associate at his law firm, and then spent 3 years at his law firm, coming out of school. And that opportunity presented itself. Like I met him in the dining hall. And so it's just that strong. And we talked earlier today, I get more emails than I can count with people, reaching out, either reaching out for jobs, reaching out to be connected to other folks, and I get more emails than I can respond to. I respond to every single Notre Dame email that comes in, because Notre Dame alumni responded to my emails when I was coming out of school, and they still respond to my emails.
Well, I'm sure they respond now. I mean, let's be honest. Like, if you got, Chief Diversity Officer, Brooklyn Nets, under the title, I'm sure there's a lot of responses now. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the things Monica and I talked about as we were preparing for this is, Jackie, you talked about you had never stepped foot on here, on this campus. And in your high school class and your college class, like, you look like everybody else. But when you came here, it was different. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about any type of imposter syndrome that you may have faced, or talk to us about an experience that you had when you first got to campus where you said, I'm no longer in Atlanta. I'm in South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's natural when you are in a space that is, not filled with people that look like you, to question whether or not this is where you should be. And so I remember my first, reading assignment in law school It was 7 pages, and it probably took me like 3 hours to read those 7 pages and understand. And I'm just sitting there like, there's no way it's taking these other, like my other classmates this long. And like I was embarrassed to ask that question. Had I asked that question, I would have found out that it took them 3 hours or longer with that. But instead of looking around and saying like, this is hard for everybody, I just assumed that it was hard for me.
Yeah.
And so it took a while to overcome that. But that was a self-doubt that probably would have been alleviated by having open and honest conversations. And I think that in 2022, people are more vulnerable. People are living their lives on the internet. So like they're more likely to have these conversations that we weren't having. And so it took a while for me to like gain that confidence, you know, to know that like, yes, I belong. And so if you ask me, what would I tell my 1L self now? The only thing that I would say is you belong. Like you were here because you were supposed to be here. You are talented, you are smart, and you are just as capable, if not more capable, than your classmates. But that is not something that I just intuitively knew, you know, when I got here.
Yeah, I think it's important, right? We have, again, a bunch of admitted students here. We have 1Ls. We have folks who've been practicing for 25 years and folks who just started practicing. And it's important to reiterate that you do belong. You are here for a reason. You are not here because of some box that you checked on your application. And don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to ask questions that you may think nobody else is asking. Everybody else in the classroom is asking those same questions. They're afraid to ask the questions as well.
Sticking kind of with this topic as well, I'm curious, what was the process of overcoming that imposter syndrome like for you?
I think a turning point for me was BLSA Weekend, to be honest. It was like my first time being able to interact with alumni who were, you know, super successful, had similar upbringings that I had, and like could map out like this is how you get here. And I was able to ask them questions like, was this hard for you? How would you overcome that? And then just like I'm telling you guys now to reach out, you know, and you have a network, they did the same thing for me. And so being able to have those conversations and listen to stories of, you know, failure is probably the wrong word, but listen to stories where they were less successful than they wanted to be. And I'm looking at them like you are at the pinnacle of success. It was like, oh, okay, cool. Like I can stumble now, I can learn, I can, you know, build some confidence, build some experience, and I can get here too.
Yeah.
Do you think it's something that you have overcome, or is it something you still experience in your life today?
Oh yeah, I've overcome it. Yeah. Yeah, I've overcome it.
So we'll talk about, you mentioned, we're going to dive into some DEI topics that are really passionate and that you really have deep feelings for. But, so you go to this law firm. So you meet Tom, you go to this law firm, you're a young black associate in a law firm where I presume not many people who look like you.
It was me.
That's what I thought. I didn't want to make that assumption. I wanted you to make that. So talk to us about some of the struggles you had very early on.
I didn't have any mentors in that space. And like there was just little day-to-day things that happen when you are, you know, seemingly isolated in a space. I played on our law firm's basketball team. And so we played in a lawyers league against other law firms. And every time we would go play, you know, another lawyer on a different team would ask me if I worked in the mailroom. I'm like, dude, it's the lawyers league. Like, why is your assumption that I'm not a lawyer?
Yeah.
And so like, there were challenges like that. And then like, little challenges that I think people had just not thought about because there hadn't been black attorneys there before. So like, Martin Luther King Day was a floating holiday, and along with Columbus Day. And so due to the school schedule, all of the lawyers took off Columbus Day and then came to work on Martin Luther King Day, and I'm the black associate who's there, and it's like, I mean, I'm also from Atlanta too. Like, this is a different thing for me. Like, I'm not gonna come to work, but then it's like the one black guy's not at work right now, and so thankfully, like my firm was receptive to my conversations with them, and so I explained to them how that's isolating and puts me in a different position. And so for the next year, like Martin Luther King Day became like an actual company holiday, so that people were not deciding between the two. But it's those little things that you don't have to think about when there is no diversity, in that space.
Yeah.
The company I'm at now, like 6 years ago, we didn't have, a maternity leave policy. We didn't have women that were having kids, and then all of a sudden, we started having women that had kids. We're like, oh, we need a maternity leave policy. We need a paternity leave policy. But it's like, unless you have diversity within your organization, within your school, you're not thinking about all of these things that may not affect you personally.
Yeah. So in that lawyer league, how many points did you average in that lawyer league? So they probably asked a question like, "Yo, is this the ringer from the mail or the child ringer?"
It's the ringer from Notre Dame Law
School. All right. So you were with the firm. You immediately made an impact in changing things like making Martin Luther King an actual observed holiday, right? As you see those changes happen, how does that make you feel in the workplace?
Probably a mix of emotions. Like, I feel happy that, the firm or the company that I'm with now is receptive to these changes. But I also feel burdened that, like, I have to go have this conversation for those changes, to happen. And so I know we'll get to this later within that, but that's how I end up in a DEI role, because so many times you end up doing DEI work to make it an inclusive place for yourself. You're just not getting paid for it. So it's the extra work that's happening within that. And so now, I'm blessed that we're like, that's all I do.
Yeah.
All I do is, hey, did you think about this? You think about that? You think about that? This don't work for this group.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you obviously left that firm at some point. What was that like, transitioning out of firm life and into a new career?
It was, good. I mean, it was a happy time for me. Like, I went to that law firm. One, I wanted to work for Tom Curry, but two, I wanted to learn how to be a lawyer before entering into sports. Like, Notre Dame did a great job of teaching me how to learn the law, but I wanted to go out and, like, get some practical skills with this. So I always had the plan of, as I started out, like, wanting to be a sports agent. And so after a few years in the law firm, my best friend from undergrad and I decided to leave our firms together. And we were going to start our own agency. And in the process of us looking to start our own agency, a few agencies were interested in us. And so that's how we ended up joining the agency that we went with, All Pro Sports.
What was that transition like, going from just busy, crazy, bustling law firm life into something completely different?
I traded one busy career for another. Except, I wasn't sitting behind a desk as much. And so still using the skill set that I got from Notre Dame and practicing law. So now I'm, drafting, negotiating, and reviewing, contracts, both on, negotiating with teams, negotiating, marketing deals, but then also setting up the charitable foundations of all of our players. And so I was still, doing law. I just was not doing it at a law firm anymore. And my boss, went from, older than me to 19, 20, and 21-year-old fickle mind of athletes.
So sticking with this a little bit, something Mauri and I were talking about is sports law is typically something that's just really glamorous, super sexy. What does it actually look like in practice?
No, it's still pretty sexy. It's fun to be out with players. It's fun to be at games and events. But I'll answer it in two different ways. So on the player side, it is extremely time consuming. You are on the road. So I miss Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, my wife's birthday, anniversaries, because you are always traveling. If I was still an agent, I'd be at March Madness right now. I wouldn't be here. But on the team side, it's less travel, and so you are in one location, but you're still negotiating different contracts and different deals. The names on the paper just change, but it is fun to be out and about in those spaces.
So you have this really cool job, right? And you're at All Pro Sports. I think I came to law school because I wanted to be an agent. And then I was these fickle 19-year-olds, I don't have patience for that, right? So you're general counsel for All Pro Sports, right? And now you have a leadership role. How did DEI change at All Pro Sports in comparison to the firm?
So I would say that was actually a place where everybody looked like me. I worked for the first black super agent, Lamont Smith, and so he's the one that challenged the junior rule for players to be able to come out with Barry Sanders. We had Jerome Bettis as a client, and so what Lamont instilled in me was we need to be doing something beyond making sure that our players are set up on the field. It was every player that we represented had to establish a charitable foundation, either in the city where they currently played, the city where they were from, or the city that they went to school.
Okay.
And so my job with them was to sit down and figure out what could we do to uplift the community in which you were from. And so that's where I got my initial experience in access programming. And so with Jerome Bettis, we established a foundation that was addressing the digital divide in Detroit, because they weren't internet, there wasn't computers. And so I would say that the DEI experience there was all about creating access programming to underserved communities. And so, when people think about DEI in 2022, everybody assumes it is, this HR position.
Yeah.
But it's much broader than that, and I know we'll get into that when we talk about my current role now. But yeah, access programming was the big key there, and then making sure that we were giving people an opportunity for employment. Agent world is not diverse, and it is tough to break into sports in general. It is even tougher to break in on the agency side, and so was very intentional in our hiring, very intentional in our internship programming, and intentional with making sure that people who worked with us and became part of our network had opportunities well beyond us. We wanted you to be successful with us, but if you're not going to be with us, we want to make sure that you have access to go be somewhere else.
So kind of a weird question coming from me, since I am the president of the Black Law Students Association. But what exactly is DEI, and what does DEI look like in the role that you serve in?
So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so again, a lot of people think about DEI through the lens of hiring, and that's definitely an important part. So I review every hiring slate that we have. And so taking a step back, I tell everybody I work for the Brooklyn Nets. I actually work for the parent company of the Brooklyn Nets. So we have 5 companies within that. So it's the Nets, Barclays Center, New York Liberty, Long Island Nets, and Nets GC. And so all of our hiring that takes place within those five entities, I review our slates, I review our policies, I oversee our employee resource groups, which are our affinity groups. And so that's and I run our diversity council. That's what I do on the internal. But then, I'm gonna steal Max's line from earlier today. He used a great analogy from the Lion King, to where he said that, everything that you see that the light touches is your kingdom. And that's the way that DEI is within our organizations. So I'm in every single department. Like DEI influences, everything that we do. It influences how we grow our fan base. So are our tickets accessible to all of the communities that we're looking to reach? Are we inclusive in our marketing? Are we doing more than just marketing on, the fan, which is, one network? Like, are we also on Hot 97? Like, as we're going out, our merchandise, do we have dad hats, but do we also have snapbacks in there to continue to go? And then evaluating our partners. There's a saying, down south of Domino's, all money ain't good money. And so I review our partners to make sure that their values align with the values that we set out as an organization. And then if you tell me, I'll use Verizon as an example. Verizon is very intentional in uplifting Hispanic youth. So great. During our Noche Latina celebration, I want you to underwrite tickets for these local Hispanic community groups. I want you to sit on these panels that we're going to have, so that people are able to look at people that look like them in C-suite roles within organizations. And so I do all of that for within the organization, but then I also create access programming outside. And so I created our supplier diversity program, so where we are actively looking to work with minority-owned businesses throughout Brooklyn. And so we do that in two ways. One, every one of our departments accesses this diversity database. But two, we have a separate food and beverage component for Barclays Center. So where I'm bringing in diverse vendors into Barclays Center. And so I run what we call a Brooklyn Market, which is a smorgasbord. So we have four stands that are just a rotating stands for minority-owned vendors that we have. And so we give it to them for 1 to 2 months at a time, because getting a full-time stand is oftentimes too heavy of a lift to get started. And so what this program does is it gives them an opportunity to have a proof of concept within Barclays Center. And so, best case scenario, they do well, then we'll help them get this full-time stand for the next season. But worst case scenario, they've interacted with 17,000 fans on a nightly basis from 1 month to 2 months, who are now being driven back to their brick and mortar.
You're so cool.
All right, so
So cool.
you do a lot of stuff, right? So let's unpack some of that a little bit. But before we do that, so you talked about all of the things that you've been successful at getting leadership, team ownership to buy into and allow you to pursue. There's got to be something that some idea you have, and you presented it to the leadership, you presented it to team ownership, and you had to fight for it. It wasn't immediately accepted. Talk to us about an example of an idea that you had to fight for, and you had to yield some power and use some weight to get that idea across the board.
I would say incorporating DEI metrics into our performance reviews.
Okay.
And fight for is probably the wrong word, but I had to do a lot of explaining. Because again, my mandate is pretty broad. I look at D&I well beyond it just being the right thing to do. It's the right thing to be inclusive and equitable. No, that's fantastic. But I also look at it as essential to driving our bottom line. It's essential to the success of our company in the diverse borough that is Brooklyn. And so I have to explain to our stakeholders why DEI is essential to your department and why this is important. Why is it important that you are inclusive in your hiring? Why is it important that you are utilizing our supplier diversity program? But why is it important that you are also continuing to educate yourself? Not just the mandatory trainings that are taking place, but going through and taking optional trainings, within that, and why that makes us better as an organization.
So when you talk about incorporating it into reviews, at what level are you talking about to make sure that kind of we're all on the same page? Are you talking about mid-level managers, or how high in the organization are you saying, no, we are going to incorporate DEI metrics into your performance reviews?
Everybody.
And why is that important to you?
Again, beyond it just being the right thing to do, what I'm ultimately trying to do is change behavior within this. We have not been an inclusive society. And so there's two ways you can go about it. You can go about it by changing hearts, and that's cool. But I'd rather change behavior first, because changing behavior is immediate within that. It takes longer to change hearts. I mean, we've seen all types of movies to where folks were like, "Oh man, I didn't even know that this was possible. Now I love you." And this is I said, we can get there if I can change your behavior.
Change behavior is hard though.
It's not when you tie to compensation.
Oh,
Pretty easy.
Agreed. So, all right. So people's compensation is tied to this.
Yeah.
Give us an example of a change that you saw after this policy was implemented that sticks out in your mind.
All of the ideas are no longer coming from my department. They are coming from everywhere. And so our merchandise department is coming to me with, hey, these are some Black designers that are from Brooklyn that we can highlight during Black History Month, to where we can sell their merchandise in the team store. Our entertainment team is saying hey, these are the women-owned businesses that we are using for our outfits and our hair. And so people are helping to source. I'm getting our marketing department that is sending us different minority-owned restaurants that we should be highlighting and considering for Brooklyn market. And so it is less of a, hey, let me come up with something and talk to y'all about it, to where it's more collaborative, and now we're all working together, because we're seeing what those benefits are. We're seeing the change in our families and demand for tickets. I mean, for us, we are still a startup for in Brooklyn. This is our ninth season, and so coming to a new place, a place that was a lot of folks were less than excited to see us move in, as some people had to move out, and so again, I think that we owe it to our community to use our platform to uplift and create these opportunities. And I'm seeing my teammates within the organization, start to feel that as well.
You got a question? I can keep going.
I was gonna say, I see you writing. I know you got it going, but I'm happy to jump in.
So before we go, I'm gonna take a break right now. Are there any questions in the audience? Because what happens is I can keep going. Monica can keep going. We got about 20 minutes left. And so I want to make sure that we have time for students, admitted students, parents, alumni, anybody. Anybody have any questions that you want to fire at Jackie right now? Yes. Okay, before you do it though, you got to stand up. you're not, so that's the thing. So now you wouldn't have raised your hand if I would have said that at first. So stand up, you got to say your name. If you're in school, what year you are, where you're from, and then your question.
Hello, my name is Amber. I'm with One Out in New York. My question is, what would you do differently if you knew then what you know now?
Not much. I would say that my attitude probably would have changed about some of the things that were happening. I would have been more confident earlier. I would have asked more questions. and I would have asked for more help. But I am like happy with the path that I took. But it didn't have to be as hard as it was, because I was operating, thinking that I was by myself when I didn't have to be.
Any other questions? Because
My name is Deacon. I'm in Ohio. I'm an incoming freshman law student, so I'm getting involved.
Welcome, Deacon. We got it.
I had a question. So you talked about how you were always self-driven, self-motivated. Did you always have the clarity that you wanted to work in sports? Like, now, 10, 15 years later, you're in counsel, you're looking at next. Did you always have like an end goal I want to be here? And then you had like legal experience in the law firm, now you're a devil counsel. So one thing I struggle with is I've always been driven and motivated, but it's kind of hard, my age probably, like have like that bullseye, that North Star, like driving. Did you always have that?
Yeah, before you respond, I do want to say, so Deacon, you're in the law school, and you just accepted the law school's offer to come to school. So you can't back out of this anymore, man. So you were gonna be here in the fall. Go ahead, Max. Oh, yeah, so Deacon's not Mike. So Deacon's question was, Jackie, how did you know, or did you always know that you were driven and wanted to be in sports?
Yeah, so quick clarification. I'm the chief diversity officer, not general counsel. I was general counsel before. I don't want Jeff Gordon to come find me. But yeah, I knew that I wanted to be in sports. I didn't always know what that looked like. The role that I have now didn't exist when I was in school. It didn't exist 5 years ago. And so I knew I wanted to be in sports. I knew I wanted to be around athletes, and knew I wanted to make a difference. But I wasn't sure what that was going to be. But to the first question about being self-driven and motivated, like yes, I've always been again, say the goal out loud and find a way to go get it. And yeah, that path isn't always straight. Can look like this. As you've seen, I've had a few different stops along the way in various industries. But like being in sports was my North Star. But when I left sports and was running a fit tech company, I didn't know that I was going to get back into sports. But I did feel, after a few years, I did feel a calling to get back in there, and I plan to stay for a while.
Any other questions? Yes.
Sure. Malcolm Shock, I'm a current 2L in law school. I guess my question is kind of, especially given the past 2 years of COVID stuff, we haven't seen maybe the continuity in terms of having alumni in these types of events, providing maybe the experience that we might have been left out of. As a current 2L, I'm sure Monica and I have kind of talked about this before as well. It's important for us to kind of bring this back and, have things like this. So I'm kind of curious to see your perspective on what foundational aspects, people like us, 2Ls, the rails are kind of on their way out. Like for us, we're going to be in those positions to kind of be able to look back and give, the younger ones advice and show them around. What kind of foundational aspects really helps to create that community, or the structure that, helps create success and the support that, minorities might need?
So I'll repeat the question, and Malcolm, correct me if I'm wrong, but his question, Jackie, is what foundational aspects did you find and did you experience at Notre Dame that created that community that brought you back here to speak today?
Even in your career in general.
And he expanded upon in your career as well.
I mean, I think that it goes back to the sense of community that is here. Like I wouldn't go back just anywhere. This is a difficult trip to make, but it's a trip that I would make anytime that I'm asked. When Mauri and I were talking about even having this fireside chat, like all he said in the text message was, "We need a speaker," and I said, "Say less," because when Notre Dame calls, I will be here. And so when a boss, a student, reaches out, like I am there, and I'll speak for my wife, who is also class of 2007. Like she's there as well. She may not be here physically, but anything that we can do to help and make your burden a little lighter, we are happy to do so, because we have people who have done that and continue to do that for us. And so it is important that once people show up for you, that you pass that back and make sure that you show up for the next group.
And I'll reiterate what he said. I met Jackie fall of last year at our first board meeting. Tom Curtin called and said, "Hey, I'm nominating Jackie to the board. He's somebody you need to meet." So what did Tom do? He set up a call for Jackie and I. And anybody who knows Tom, that call was about 20 minutes. Tom talked for 19 and a half. Okay? But he definitely said, "Okay, now Mauri, Jackie, you two have each other's number. Connect." And that's what we did. And Monica and I talked, and we said, "Hey, we want to have this fireside chat." And Max and I were looking for speakers, and we both kind of like, on a call, I said, "Max, Jackie's gonna be there. Why not just reach out to Jackie?" And it was that. It was just that one message, and it was legit. Say less. Tell me what time I need to be there. We had to coordinate attire today because we didn't want to show up too formal, right? Jackie did us a favor, took his hat off today.
That's right.
But the snapback is right behind there in the witness stand.
I'm missing it too.
So Jackie, we got about 10 minutes left, and we have students in here. And one of the things you said earlier was sports is tough to break into, right? And I imagine that there are students here. I happen to know that there's a student sitting to my left who wants to break into sports law. So tell Monica what tips you have besides reaching out to you and staying in contact with you. How can students break into sports law?
I actually think that that's the best way. It's like going through, anytime that I was looking to change careers or get opportunities or meet folks, my first stop was LinkedIn. And I would just go through and I put in Notre Dame, and then I look to see who from Notre Dame is operating in the industry that I want to be in. And so, Monica, we should have a conversation after this.
I will call you tonight.
Yeah. But that's how it happens. And so sports is a very it's a small circle, but it is a close-knit circle. And so similarly to what I was talking about before about opportunities within my former organization, maybe there's not an opportunity that fits you within one of our entities, but I know somebody at every other team in the NBA. I know folks at most teams in the NFL and at the league office. So there's an opportunity somewhere. We'll find it.
Oh, we will.
Yeah, we'll find it.
So I'm gonna say, Monica, when I first got here this weekend, Monica said, "Hey, I still want to work at the Raiders, okay? That's the goal, is to go work at the Raiders." And so we're going to make sure Monica makes it to the Raiders. But the funny thing is, there are executives with the Raiders, and guess what school they happen to go to? Notre Dame. It runs deep. It runs deep. Okay, it runs deep. So Jackie, another question I have so you mentioned that DEI didn't exist with the Brooklyn Nets 5 years ago. Frankly, DEI didn't exist at a lot of companies prior to May of 2020, right? And you're creating and trailblazing a path every single day. You make decisions, or you come up with the programs, or you collectively come up with programs across the organization. How has your training and experience as a lawyer positioned you to take on that challenge?
I think my training as a lawyer taught me to really be detail oriented, and a lot of the work that I do in terms of creating programs and policies, the details matter. The details matter when we are crafting a statement in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Details matter when we are addressing, the Asian hate crimes that are happening almost daily in New York City. Details matter when you are having conversations with our employee resource groups, our affinity groups, and coming up with different policies that are going to, impact them. And I would say that my training also taught me how to communicate those details and communicate it in a manner in which it is direct but digestible. Within that. And so those are skills that I learned here in trial advocacy class and taking the public defender externship with Rudy. And so those are skills that are definitely transferable. I think that being taught at a university like Notre Dame prepares you for really anything that you want to do. And so use these, your professors, use your students. I learned just as much from my classmates as I have from my professors. So keep this network and keep it tight and learn and educate each other.
Now, Jackie, just for the sake of the students that we have in this room, when it comes to networking and reaching out to different alumni, what just advice do you have about going through that process?
Put Notre Dame law in the subject line. Really? Yeah, I would say, I was talking to a student earlier today, and it's not being afraid to ask. The worst case scenario is somebody doesn't respond or doesn't give you the answer that you're looking for, but you're right back where you started. Best case scenario is they really help you within that. And so I was serious about putting Notre Dame law in that subject line, because again, folks are busy, and so when they are skimming through the hundreds of emails that they may get, that's something that's going to grab their attention, and I would say using that style of communication to set up a different conversation is probably better than writing an essay in that email. But seriously, reach out to folks and ask for help.
So I'll add to that, and certainly put Notre Dame law, but put BLSA.
Yeah.
I mean, the community that Jackie talked about is a direct connection to Notre Dame BLSA. And we respond to those emails just a little faster than other emails that hit the inbox, because we recognize the struggle and the difficulty and the courage it takes to hit send on that message. And so reach out, connect with us, stay in contact with us. Don't be afraid to just say hi, right? I know that over Christmas break, I reached out to some of the 1Ls that I met, and I was just like, yo, congrats on the end of the first semester. Hope you're enjoying Christmas break, right? And those messages, that connection, that's how you build genuine relationships with people. And those genuine relationships are what get you further, are what put you top of mind when Jackie has an opportunity that comes up that may be at the Nets or maybe somewhere else, and he happens to know that you're interested in a sports law position. So stay connected with us, okay? We got 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yes.
My name is Owen Ferguson. I'm a 1L from the Bahamas. So you made a good point that just a lot of DEI work is honestly starting with your own needs and your peers and articulating that on the job. So I'm wondering what you do when you get tired of that, And would you recommend for us like not to burn out in those efforts as students?
1 second, I gotta repeat it for the camera. Max might throw something at me if I don't repeat it. So, Owen's question is, what do you do when you get tired of being the person pushing DEI out, and how can they apply those same tactics as students?
I think it's always important to know your why, and then to take a step back and look at the impact that it's having. Like, I'll be honest with you, like it is difficult at times. It's burdensome and annoying. But I look at the impact that we're having, like, within the organization. I look at the impact that we're having in the community. I look at our fan base, and I look at, we're having 1,200 students coming to the game on Tuesday, and a lot of those students have never been to Barclays Center. Like, now they get to come and watch great basketball. I look at how this type of programming didn't exist when I was young, and I'm helping to create those programs to where, like, my kids don't know a time when these programs didn't exist. I have 2 sons that are 7 and 4 years old, and, like, all they know is, like, this stuff exists, this access to opportunity, it exists. And so taking the step back and noticing the why, and patting yourself on the back sometimes, you're like, oh, that's pretty dope. Like, it will give you that fuel to keep going.
Yes, sir.
This is veering in a different direction, but I really feel like it would be a terrible missed opportunity not to ask you this question. So your career is at the intersection of law, sports, and DE&I. And we're at the law school at the university at a time where we just appointed a new head coach of our football team, Marcus Ferguson, only the second black man to hold that office. What do you think about that? And what are your thoughts on something like that at Notre Dame happening in a time where we're also seeing a clear draw of attention to the fact that there's virtually no black head coaches in the NFL?
So I'll repeat the question. What are your thoughts on Marcus Freeman being the second black head coach named at Notre Dame, and how you react to the fact that that's happening at a time that there's only one black head coach in the NFL?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Max, when I got to Notre Dame when we had the first black head coach. Yeah. When we were all holding, like Charles just did, like we was all holding up the W's for Ty Willingham. And to answer your question directly, I'm proud that Coach Freeman was hired. I think that after dismissal of Ty, I was not confident that we would ever have a black head coach again. And I don't know if you remember, but he's one of, if not the only head coach that was not afforded his full first contract. And so I was part of those campus conversations that were taking place. And so whether or not you agree with his performance on the field, he is unique in that he was the only black head coach at that time, and then unique in that he was not given that same opportunity that his peers were given. And so I look at the university now and hiring Coach Freeman and hope that that's something that changes. There were, as you know, they could have gone in a number of different directions, and they went internal with a young black head coach who had never been a head coach before, which is oftentimes used as a demerit for black coaches in a way that it is not used for white head coaches. And so I think that, again, the word that I would use is proud, and proud of the courage I think that the university showed in making that decision, and a decision that they would not have made, previously.
Great. Well, we're almost out of time.
So I got one question before you go.
I got 2 questions.
You got 2?
That's crazy.
Okay. So we talk about sports. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. So NBA playoffs are coming up. And anybody who follows the NBA and follows the Brooklyn Nets, I see a couple smiles, people a little excited. Yo, is Kyrie playing in the playoffs or not?
Vaccine mandates in New York City have been relaxed.
That's what I'm talking about. The playoffs will be fun this year.
We will be at full steam.
Good stuff. That's good to hear.
Okay, so just 2 quick questions for you. One, I'm curious as to what the most rewarding part of your job is. And then 2, what comes next from you? Where are you going from here? Where are you looking to go? Any new goals or new directions you're looking to go in?
I'd say that my biggest sense of pride at work is our supplier diversity program. As a former black entrepreneur, like I understand these struggles all too well of struggling for access to capital, struggling for mentors, struggling for guidance around marketing, but also just like struggling for a shot, someone to taking that shot. And so in my role now, having the opportunity to provide a very large platform for minority-owned companies within Brooklyn is a very happy place for me to be. And then taking that a step further and leveraging the relationships that we have with our partners and allowing them to do business. It's one thing for us to do business with a company and provide them with money. It's another thing for us to hire them, but then get other people to hire them as well. And so that is probably that's my baby at work. And what's next? I don't know. As we've talked about, I've done a whole lot of different things. So I don't know. I may be an astronaut.
Well, you can go to space now.
I can go to space now. Me and straight hands.
So before we end, I think that everybody who's been a part of BLSA or BLSA events this year would agree that Monica has done a fantastic job of resurrecting. She gave me that look, but she had no idea I was doing this. But Monica, thank you. We appreciate you, and we are excited with the status of BLSA that you are going to pass on. We would not be here without your leadership, without your dedication to restoring the community that Jackie talked about today. And so from all of us, thank you. We appreciate you. And please make sure you continue to instill this community within BLSA.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that said, Jackie, yo, we appreciate it. It's been a great talk. And we look forward to more. And anybody who has any questions, Jackie is here all weekend. Anybody who's coming to the events tomorrow, the Race and Law Symposium, tomorrow night, the BLSA Alumni Dinner. Max is telling me that, black tie it up. He wants it to look good. Y'all come looking nice, come clean. We want to see it. Jackie, thanks. And thanks to everybody who was able to make it today.